Pat's been out here before to share. He had worked on, you've had five VC-backed startups to this point. And so Cantata was one he was working on before, and he had spoken at the lunch before on that one, so we'll be able to hear a little bit more about River, but he's here to talk about more just the mindset of entrepreneurship and what it takes, and so grit, perseverance, and tenacity. So thank you, Pat. Welcome to the lunch.
Thank you. Good afternoon, just barely. Let me unload here. Pardon me. This is going to be kind of random. I hope you don't mind a little bit of random. There is a theme, but you'll have to figure out what it is because I haven't been able to. I want to talk about some of the qualities that make up the DNA of an entrepreneur. How do you know if you can be an entrepreneur? You can read all kinds of things. There's, the 3 qualities for, there's 8, there's 12, there's 6. You can go out and Google that, and there's all kinds of articles. I'm going to cover some that I think were useful and are useful to me, and allow you to think about yourself, maybe be a little introspective. And would you like your carrot?
Thank you.
I'd step on it if we left it there. So, DNA is an amazing element. Bill Gates said it's the most incredible piece of coding ever that he's aware of. Imagine all of the code that make up each of us is in something smaller than the head of a pin. If you were to stretch it out, it would be miles. It folds in on itself and connects at very specific places, and if it doesn't connect there, things don't work. Diseases happen. And then think about the fact that, I don't know what the exact number is, but 10, 20, 30 million times a day, it replicates itself. I don't know about you, but makes me think somebody designed it. The interesting thing about DNA, there's an argument about, are we born entrepreneurs, or do we become an entrepreneur? Do we develop qualities to be an entrepreneur? I think the answer to that is yes, both. If you look at genetics, DNA definitely plays a huge part in what we look like, what we become, even according to some studiers of DNA, even emotional and intellectual qualities that we have. However, there's this other element of DNA that was just discovered in the last 15 years called epigenetics, which is the effect of the environment on DNA. That it was found that even though you have the coding for a certain quality, depending on the environment, either good or bad, it could express itself or it may not. And epigenetics has changed radically the thought of how do we develop. It's shown that a society where people grow up in like famine-like qualities, they will develop different qualities than a society just miles away who aren't in famine. And it's also shown that within a generation or so, if the famine ends, new qualities Isn't it fascinating that epigenetics, the Darwinian thought is it takes hundreds of millions of years for changes to take place, and yet within a generation, certain qualities can change based upon the environment. So I believe that there are innate qualities that make up an entrepreneur. And I'm going to talk about some of them. But there's also things that we expose ourselves to. We get exposed to as we're growing up, as you're going to college, as you're in high school, in jobs that you choose to develop a quality. So there are some qualities that you just have. There's others that you can develop. Can entrepreneurship be taught? Yeah, it certainly can be influenced. I'm going to share some things, though, that you might ask yourself, do I have that? And if you don't, can you develop it? And if you don't feel like you can develop it, maybe you should be an entrepreneur. So maybe I'm here to encourage you about being an entrepreneur, maybe to discourage you from being an entrepreneur. You should be what your DNA is. The number one quality, I believe, is, are you driven to create? What is it that drove Eric Clapton to develop such an incredible craft? He just wasn't born with the ability to play guitar. What is it about Jason Mraz that he can write songs and play and sing? He wasn't just born with that capability. He developed it, but it was there. The quality was there. I wish I could write songs. I've tried even. I used to play the piano, and I was pretty good at it, actually. But I didn't have that. I wasn't going to be a musician. However, if Eric Clapton wouldn't, even though he had this incredible talent, had he never developed that into a skill, he wouldn't be Eric Clapton. He would just be another ordinary person. And there's nothing wrong with being another ordinary person, So there again, innate quality that he made choices, musicians, artists, writers, books, they develop a skill. And along the way, they actually often fail. I mean, Eric Clapton probably wasn't very good at the beginning, right? And, it took a long time. Let's go back to that. So when I look at me, all my life, I pretty much was driven to create. It was just kind of there. Throughout my grade school years, there were things that I took an interest in and created something. I won the top prize in Illinois State Science Fair because I became obsessed with an idea that I turned into a project that became the winning science award for the whole state of Illinois. And I did that in 8th grade. Why? Because there was something driving me, or something took my interest. I wanted to create. I was creative. Are you creative? And you have some signs of, do you like music? Do you, what would you do? Could you be driven to learn how to play the guitar really, really well? Are there things that are indications that you have a drive to create? Because that's what entrepreneurship is. You're creating something out of nothing. You start with nothing. And through actions that you take, you create something. I find that if I'm not involved in something creative, building a company that are building an idea, working on an idea that I like to say, if I'm not doing that, I create chaos all around me. I'll find something to create so that so that my creative juices are being fed. Another element of that is about an entrepreneur is they solve problems, and that's part of the creative process. So you have to look at yourself. Are you that? Are you driven to create or be a part of a creation? Because no startup in the tech world, really no startup really anywhere, for the most part, is done by one person. They have help. So along the way, what are some of the things that you run into? And some of them are a paradox. In order to create something, you have to have the conviction that somebody needs it, that you need it, that if I need it, there's probably other people that need it. With ACT, my first product, ACT was the best-selling contact manager, sold 10 million copies or so. I created it for myself. I was driven to create it because I wanted it. I was selling computers in the early 80s. There was no software for salespeople. I'm a salesperson. And there wasn't any software that I could use. And I thought it was stupid that I was selling computers and had no reason to use one. And I had this drive to create something for myself. It wasn't until later that I began to say, maybe I could sell some of this stuff to other people. And a lot of that came from people looking over my shoulders at what I was doing. I said, can I get that? Well, I didn't write it initially, I didn't write it ever in a commercial language that I could sell it to other people. But it gave me the idea that, what I have created is valuable for other people. Many ideas, most really good ideas for building a business, comes out of something like that. You stumble upon an idea, and you go, how come nobody solved this problem? Is there anybody, and you look around and you find out nobody has solved this problem. And if it's a big enough problem, you have a pretty good idea for starting a business. Most businesses solve a problem. However, there's the opposite. There's this ambiguity that's always there, and you have to be very comfortable with having intention, the fact that you have a conviction with, I'm not really so sure. I think this is the way to solve the problem, but I'm not really so sure. And it's in this tension that drives you to figure out what is the right way to solve this problem. And being comfortable with ambiguity, not being sure, is difficult. And you can't, this whole thing of, minimally viable product and show it to people and get feedback, there's no certainty that that feedback is accurate. No certainty. People will tell you they'll buy it if you build it, and then they won't. They say, or they think, oh yeah, this is really wonderful, and then when you deliver it, oh well, I didn't think it was going to be blue, or I didn't think it was going to, require me to run a Mac. Why'd you build it just for a Mac? There's all kind of reasons. So feedback isn't necessarily accurate. I have done that. A lot of Cantata and River, and they're basically both the same company. And if we get a chance, I'll talk about it. But we did things based on assumptions, and we did them with incredible focus. And we had feedback from people, and those assumptions turned out to be wrong. So we had incredible conviction, And yet there was this ambiguity, I'm not 100% sure. You have to be, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be comfortable holding those two things in tension, because you'll never be 100% sure. Another quality of an entrepreneur is irrational optimism. Optimistic to a point of really being crazy. I'm that way. I have to catch myself. I've said it recently, and because of some things that, some opportunities and some things we could do, and I'll say, absolutely, we can do that. I know we can do that. I know I can do that. And then I go away and go, one thing I know about myself is that I am irrationally optimistic. And I have to bring that into the equation. I have to ask myself, am I being optimistic irrationally? So you want to get to this rational optimism, but typically in any entrepreneur, this exists. I know I can do it. I know the right way to do it. I know customers will buy. I know prospects. I know I can raise the money. Well, maybe you can. I'll give you an example. 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, we had built a product that was working, and we could have made work, even though it wasn't built as high quality as it needed to be. And I believe that I could do what I did before with SalesLogix. With SalesLogix, I raised $17 million before I shipped a product. Today in venture capital, that's basically not possible. However, I didn't believe that 3 years ago, even though people were saying, without, you can't just go out and raise money without proof that the product that you built, people will buy it, people will pay for it. You have to have a lot of proof. And I didn't believe it. I said, I can raise money. So I went to Silicon Valley, talked to many of the same people who made a lot of money on SalesLogix, talked to many others. Think about this. In 3 weeks, I had 55 meetings with venture capitalists, 24 different venture capitalists, so I had multiple meetings with some of them. 55 meetings in 15 days, 15 business days. And I was told no. Nobody. Not a single one. I came close, but I got no from 24 VCs. Did I stop? No, I kept going. We'll get to that. But my irrational optimism drove me to believe that I could do what others were telling me that I couldn't do. And it turned out that they were right. A lot of times, though, your irrational optimism turns out to be what puts you over the hurdle. What nobody else thinks you can do, you can do. So this is a quality that's nice to have. It keeps you going. Okay? It's nice to have. But you do have to be aware that if you're an entrepreneur, there are times where you got to ask yourself, am I really being rational? Can I really do this? Let's look more closely at this. Let's try to gather some facts to support whether or not my optimism is rational or irrational. Building a startup is not glamorous. Everybody looks at people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sergey Brin. Some people look at me and, oh man, it's incredible, it's glamorous, it's wonderful. Well, I want to tell you, doing a startup is friggin' hard. And it's not glamorous when you're doing it. And we'll talk more about that. So while the desire to succeed, the desire to maybe hit it big and be a multimillionaire or perhaps a billionaire if you really hit it is okay. That's all right to be there, but you need to be aware that you probably may have heard the statement, the journey is the reward. You know, the reward is nice, but when you get there, a lot of times you go, is that all there is? Okay, I'm a multimillionaire, but I still have this drive, unsatisfied need to create something else, you know? So the journey really is the reward. As you're going along, the things you learn, the things you get to do, the people you get to meet, that's a reward. Enjoy it along the way. And realize that most of what you do in a startup is not glamorous at all. I wish this was in front of me so I wouldn't have to turn around. All right, so let's talk about three things. Perseverance, persistence, tenacity. They sound kind of the same, but they're really different, and all three are useful at different times. Perseverance. I like that the word severe is in that. Because the time to persevere is when things are severe. And almost certainly there will be times in your startup, at the beginning, at the middle, and the end, all along the way where things are shitty. Where you have screwed something up. Where somebody has told you no. 24 VCs told me no. Whatever, the key engineer that you're relying on quits, dies, moves, falls in love and says, I don't want to do this anymore. Whatever, there will be things that come up. There will be lots of things that come up that require you to persevere through severe times. Do you have that? Can you look back in your life and say, man, I've done that? You know, whatever it was, you know, in high school you were a football player and you weren't big enough, but man, you made the team and you became the starter anyway. Or you weren't fast enough, or you whatever, but you persevered through it. Whatever, if you can look back on that, that's useful. Do you have the ability? Some people don't. Some people will come up to a problem and they go, oh, well, I guess I'm not supposed to do this. So they go looking for something else. Okay, so if you have the conviction to do something, you're going to run into this, and you got to decide to push through it. Okay, and the ability to do it may be innate. It just may be natural to you because you have, like I did, such optimism. I don't care about this. I can still do it. Or you may have to choose. You may have to maybe remember what I'm telling you today and say, yeah, Pat said there's going to be times where I have to persevere. This is the time. Okay. And as you do it, you develop the quality of perseverance. Okay? Tenacity. Tenacious. It's different than perseverance. Perseverance has to do with really severe things. Tenacity is just, I got this idea, I'm obsessed with it, and I'm going to do this. And the problem with choosing to do that is that there's always bozos and barking dogs. Now, what are bozos and barking? Your mom could be a bozo. She could tell you, what are you doing? You've got a degree, why don't you just go get a job? Earn $45,000 a year, earn $65,000. What are you doing? It could be your dad, it could be a cousin, it could be your best friends. You think you're crazy. Well, those are what I call bozos. And then when you do certain things, no matter which way you do it, I've chosen to do it for mobile only. There will be barking dogs. And, you're really stupid. You only did it on mobile. Why didn't you do it for the desktop too? Are you crazy? You stupid. And then if you do it on the desktop and don't do it on mobile, there'll be somebody say, what are you, stupid? You didn't do it on mobile? Blah, 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 blah. Or you chose to build the user interface this way, or you chose to include these features and not include those. There'll always be a barking dog. They're always out there. They'll tell you, you are stupid. Well, if you are tenacious, you'll just ignore it. It's a barking dog. Or that's a bozo They're trying to discourage me, and I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm a dog with a bone. I'm not going to let go of the bone, okay? And then there's persistence. Persistence is a quality that is close, is related to the others. They're all really close. Persist, for me, is when I'm told no by somebody, there's a certain amount of rejection that you feel. Anytime, if you're a salesman in particular, and you all will be a salesperson, no matter what, if you're an entrepreneur, you will be selling. Okay? You're going to sell somebody. You might have to sell a partner to join you. You might have to sell an engineer to help build it. You might have to go out and raise money. You are selling. And if you don't feel like you can sell, then find somebody who can do and partner with them. Because there's a ton of selling. Well, in selling, you have to persist. Call them up, they don't answer the phone. Send them an email, they don't answer the phone. Persist. I just keep, I meet with an investor, they look at what I'm doing, they say, I'm just not interested. I don't think you've got this part right. Well, if I get that part right, can I come back to you? Yeah, okay. I'm persistent. I don't stop at, I don't think that no is the final answer. Now, sometimes no is the final answer. And I always say that no is better than a maybe. Maybe just keeps up the agony of, I keep trying. And you really, when you say maybe, you really mean no. So a lot of times when people say maybe, I ask them, do you really mean no? Is that a polite way of saying no? And often they'll say, yeah, you're right. There's really nothing you can do. Well, that saves me a ton of time and allows me to focus on somebody else. So I had a mentor who had a saying. Now Tony, I won't say his last name, but Tony was probably still today the smartest man that I know. Is a stickler for the English language. He taught me the importance of words. And using the right words. And Tony was on my board at Sales Logics, and whenever I had an issue, a problem that I was going to present to the board that I wasn't exactly sure, I would go to Tony and he'd say, well, I don't know if I'd say it like this. I think I'd say it like this. And it was usually really useful. Well, he had something that he taught me very early on, before actually he was involved with anything that I was doing, but I had met him and we got to know one another. And Tony had a business, and it was in a very, very competitive space. And he was having, while others were falling, he was growing, he was working it. And he had this saying. He said, I may not be as smart as you. I may not be as rich as you. I may not have the same talent as you, but I can outwork you. And that was how he lived. I can outwork you. Thing was, he was one of the smartest guys, okay? But he had this thing, I can outwork you. That's really important. My son came to me after he graduated from ASU. He said, Dad, you've been successful, and I'm getting ready to go in the business world. Tell me what the secret is. I said, show up. What do you mean? Show up. Show up. If you're supposed to be there at 8, be there at 8. If you're supposed to, do certain thing, do that. 60-70% of success is just showing up. And a lot of people don't show up. It's not really that important that I'm there at 8. It's not really that important that I get this report done on time. I can get another day. Show up. That's a big part of success. I can outwork you. That's a great attitude to have. I don't have to be as smart as you. I can outwork you. I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do even more than just showing up. Shit, this is out of order, I'm sorry. Maybe not. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions and answers, and you might be thinking of some answers because I'm going to ask you some questions. Oh, no, it works the other way, I'm sorry. You can ask me questions and I'll try to give you answers. So I've said this is hard work. It takes a lot out of you. Physically, mentally, even spiritually, down deep. It's hard. It takes a lot out of you. I tell people, take care of yourself. It's nice, it's great to, okay, I'm in the mode of outworking you, but there's a time to stop. There's a time to go do something else. Go running, go play the guitar, go out on a date, go to a movie, get away from it. My escape, my diversion is golf. Golf is the only thing I can do where when I'm playing golf, when I'm hitting golf balls, practicing, I don't think about anything else. I don't, nothing. And it's wonderful to have a diversion. Another thing I do that I believe very strongly in is nutrition. Eat right, eat well. And personally, based on lots of studies, my own experience of others, what's in food, what's in food that we eat doesn't have the same kind of stuff that used to be there 80, 90 years ago. Lots of studies. Rutgers did a study where they studied organically grown vegetables with just ordinary. And these had like 70% more nutrients in them. Well, if you're not eating those, you're eating these, you don't have everything that you need. And it's amazing, I believe in my own life, I proved it, that unless I'm taking supplements, my nutrition, I'm getting all my vitamins and minerals, I don't feel as good and I don't have as much persistence and I really don't feel like working. In fact, I'm kind of depressed, I'm kind of down and easily discouraged. Exercise. Some of the best ideas I've ever had have come when I'm running. Running is like meditation to me. It's like, just plodding along, your brain kind of goes other places, and while you're focused on the trail and everything, your brain just becomes random, and all of a sudden, some problem that I'm working on, a way to solve it, just pops into your head. You go, that's crazy. Sometimes, getting enough sleep. I'll wake up and write down, especially it seems like a dream right before I wake up. Some idea. I'm working on something right now that December 8th of last year, I woke up with it fully formed in my mind. I'm still working on it a year later. It may or may not happen, but it came out of nowhere. I've learned to kind of pay attention to things that come out of nowhere. And things that I have followed up that seemingly came out of nowhere have produced amazing results. So I look back and I have a healthy respect for nowhere. Who knows? Nowhere, maybe somewhere. The universe is trying to get through to me. The laws of expectation. I'm expecting an answer. And sometimes it seems like they just come out. And it may be in a dream, maybe while I'm running, maybe in the shower. So take care of yourself because it's hard when you're acting on your DNA, when your DNA is driving you to be what you're supposed to be. Take care of yourself. It's your responsibility to make sure that your body has everything it needs. And most of those things are pretty simple. You can do them. You need to do it. Another thing, if you have a family, spend time with them. It's a shame the number of divorces that have happened because of a startup. I got divorced. Wasn't because of a startup, because I wasn't doing a startup at the time, but While I was doing those startups, man, I was consumed by them, and we grew apart. And especially after my 4 kids went away to school, empty nest, looked at her and she looked at me and said, I know you don't like me and you don't like, and I don't really like you. Why are we married? Well, a lot of that was because I wasn't developing and maintaining that relationship all along the way. So pay attention with my kids. Even though you're traveling, you're out and about, you're spending a tremendous amount of time on being an entrepreneur. The one thing that I did with my kids that have proven to be pivotal in my relationship with them, and I have a very good relationship with all 4 of my kids, is that I showed up. Going back to just show up. Anytime they had a soccer game, I was there. If they had a basketball game, I was there. If they had a play, I was there. If they had a meeting with a teacher, I was there. In any possible way, if I could be there, I was there. And it has made a huge difference. So, who would like to be the first one to ask a question? Well, thank you. Here we go. No? Yes.
Yeah. Cool. How's it going? I guess I'll stand. No, I'll sit. Hey, my name is Matt. For your first startup, how did you convince your team, the team that you built, that you could lead the startup to success when you had no credibility? Assuming, since it was your first startup, you didn't have as much credibility as you do now.
I think that is a quality I could have spent a lot of time on. It's actually I've got about 12 other slides below this ending slide. And depending on where I'm talking, I'll mix and match which ones I want to talk about. Leadership. How do you know if you're a leader? Turn around and find out if anybody's following you. And it could be throughout your whole life. I didn't realize it, but I was a leader from when I was a kid. I was always the one that says, let's ride our bikes down to Caseyville and get a ice cream cone. And 8 kids would say, yeah, let's do that. Okay. I was captain of the football team. I was captain of the soccer team. I was captain of the golf team. I was a leader. So if you need to know, so some of that is innate. I had the ability to inspire for good or bad, because I inspired a lot of things that we shouldn't have been doing. But how did I do that? I find that people want to be part of a mission. They want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. We're going to change the world. We're going to change, the way, like Amazon. We're going to change the way books were bought. That was their original idea. We're going to change the way books were bought. And now look what they've grown into. Facebook. MySpace was the dominant player, big player. And yet he built it for college kids. It started at Harvard, and for people to meet and talk to one another. It was different than MySpace. He was a leader. He began to attract people to him who saw what he was doing, and they had a growing vision. At first, it was just going to be we're going to be this cool thing that every college uses, that all college kids use, and then it grew to be beyond that. So I think if you have a good vision, a good idea, people inherently want to be a part of that. So, some people, not everybody's a risk taker, because joining you is a risk. Some people, though, are just risk takers. They're willing to go, come on, 7, let's, and some of that you have to pay for. You don't necessarily have to pay them fully what they're worth, but you got to give them stock options. They've got to feel like they're a part of, if we hit this thing big, I'm going to benefit, not just you. I worked jobs out of college. I didn't start ACT until I was out of college, about 13 years. I was in sales, and I worked for companies, and I felt like, all right, I sell and I get a commission, but hell, I'm helping build this business to a bigger business. Why shouldn't I participate in that? So the concept of stock options was there before I even knew what stock options were. There should be a way to make me a part owner. You can deal with and talk to people differently if they're an owner than if they're just an employee. Don't have employees. I've never had an employee, ever. Everybody was an owner. Everybody. The person who answered, the receptionist, she had stock, okay? So, but mostly it goes back to selling. Can you sell somebody on following you? Well, do you have a good enough idea? Do they feel your passion? Do they feel that it's a mission they want to be a part of? People want to do that. Another question. Oh, come on.
I got one. Sounds like you starting off in sales, and everything that you've done so far is highly technical. The importance of having technical skills, or is it not as important as it seems?
Well, obviously I developed some technical skills by teaching myself how to program enough to develop what became the prototype of ACT. And that was really driven by my own obsession. I wanted that. So I had to learn how to program. And doing that exposed me, well, how does programming really work? Okay. And while today I don't write any code and haven't written any code in 30 years, really, I understand it enough to be useful. I can envision how something ought to work, or how it could work. I read technical stuff. What are other companies doing it? How are they doing it? What's the best way to have your back end be able to scale? I couldn't tell you why, but I can tell you how others have built their back end. So I'm conversant in that. If I'm in front of a VC and they ask me a technical question, most of the time I can answer it. Not down to the code level, but at a high level. So it's very useful, and it's particularly in a tech world, to be tech proficient, but you don't have to know how to code. Now there are some CEOs, like Mark Zuckerberg, supposedly he still codes. I don't know if that's really true, but you need to be proficient, and you can gain that by reading and studying. Okay. What else? Yes.
What books would you recommend for the beginning entrepreneur?
Great. You gonna write them down? Because I'm gonna tell you, I expect you to read them. The best single book about doing a startup, particularly if you're going to be the CEO. The best book on being a CEO of a startup is called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, by Ben Horowitz. I was trying to think of his first name, I knew his last. Ben Horowitz. Another book, I'll give you three. Which one of those? I would say a book called Marketing Warfare by Al Ries, Jack Trout. Startups are like war. They really are. It's a lot like war. And how do you market? How do you get your product into the marketplace? Al Ries, R-I-E-S, Jack Trout, like a fish. So Marketing Warfare. The third one is a book that just came out in May of this year that was particularly useful to me, but I believe it's pertinent to everybody. It's called Team of Teams. If you're going to build a team and you're going to do something, it's really important to know how does that work? Well, how does that best work today. We live in a very different world today than when I did ACT, than when I did Sales Logics. How you build teams, how do teams interact, particularly as you grow. Team of teams is particularly useful for when you become a larger organization. How do you act small even though you're a big company? So team of teams, those are my top 3. Lots of other ones that, but those are my best 3. Yes?
There we go. Earlier, you were talking about the DNA, the topic here, and you said that some people are born to be CEOs, right?
Right.
And then you use a couple examples like Bill Gates. I heard his name. Maybe even Mark Zuckerberg, and obviously, we all know the superstars. But those guys. You think they were born to be CEOs, or like how do you explain their DNA? These guys are like, they talk about writing code and understanding algorithms and being super geniuses or whatever. They all started at Harvard and kind of like, I don't know if they were on the path of going towards the CEO, but then didn't they both leave early and then start the biggest companies ever or whatever?
Yeah, neither graduated, neither.
So those are the outliers, but just the regular people with the DNA. If they there was a speaker here, Zach, I believe, a couple weeks ago, who fell into being a CEO because he got a contract that he really didn't expect to get, and then the next thing you know, turned it into a thing.
You can have all the qualities of being an entrepreneur and never succeed. It's entirely possible. It was entirely possible that Mark Zuckerberg was wrong when he was building Facebook. There's a certain amount of luck involved. There really is. There's a certain amount of luck. I used to have a boss. I used to work for 3M. I used to have a boss, though, who used to say, he was a sales manager, had a lot of salespeople. He says, my observation after many, many years is that it seems to me that the people who work the hardest are the luckiest. I'll watch a guy who works his ass off, and he's got this big deal, and he's worked it, and he's got it, and then at the last minute it falls off. It doesn't happen. He loses it. And he says, that guy, inevitably, something will come out of the blue, and he'll still make his quota, he'll still do, even though that deal didn't happen. And he was one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. So there is a certain amount of luck. Bill Gates was lucky. He actually was. IBM made a stupid decision to license and pay royalties for DOS, the operating system that made Bill Gates, instead of just buying the damn thing. They could have wrote a check for a couple $1 million, and Bill Gates would have taken it. Instead, they just chose to pay royalties. That was a lucky decision. It was a stupid decision. And they became Microsoft because IBM made that decision. Pretty amazing. And interestingly, the DOS that Gates, or I should say, however, the operating system that Gates sold to them, he didn't even have. He went and bought it for something like $50,000 from a company who developed DOS. He bought it from them. Many, many years later, there was a lawsuit between them because they claimed Gates, didn't tell them and deceived them, and Microsoft wrote, a check for $50 million and made them go away, and it didn't really matter. But okay, was it because Gates was smart enough to say, we got that, we can do that, or was it IBM making a stupid decision to license, to pay royalties instead of just buying the damn thing? Pretty interesting story, isn't it? Yeah. Another lucky story. Sergey Brin and Larry Page sitting around trying to figure out what they were going to write a dissertation at Stanford to get their PhD. And Larry Page, out of the blue, says, I'm gonna download the whole internet to my computer. I'm going to index it. That's where Google came from. That idea. Now, he learned later that his computer couldn't hold the whole internet at the time, although the internet wasn't really very big at the time. But it turned out to be the way to do search. Index every friggin' website and every page and every word. He indexed it, and that's what Google does today. That's their multi-billion-dollar idea, right? So was that lucky? There's certain things that are just luck. Certain things that just happen maybe because he was trying to figure out what to write a PhD for, so he was working hard. You never know.
Definitely that the people who work the hardest are somehow always the ones.
It just kind of seems that way. There is a correlation, There's always stories of people just, that were, they inherited it or they, or something. There's always stories like that, and they didn't really work that hard. But things like that change the world generally come to people who work their ass off. Who else would like to ask a question? Yes.
Sorry. So kind of piggybacking off what you just said, when you see entrepreneurs like as young as us, what characteristics do you notice that identifies someone that have the same, mentality or just same characteristics as like the people you just mentioned? Like how do you sense someone is so talented and that you see a potential to be that great?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. The Beatles, they wrote a couple songs, and Brian Epstein was their agent, and he saw something in the Beatles, but he shopped the Beatles all over London to every record producer, and he got no after no after no after no until he happened on to, I believe it was George Martin, who heard something, did something, and he decided to produce a record. What do I look for? I look for, I can sum it up in one word, everything I've said in the word, and there's two ways to say it, formidable or formidable. Formidable is probably the most often. Are they formidable? I meet with some entrepreneurs who've got an idea and they're kind of blasé, and they're, it's hard to get excited about that. There's others who they've developed a passion, I'm going to change the world. And you look at the idea and you look at the way they're implementing it and how they're going about it, how they're going to get it to market. Can they give answers to those questions? And they don't necessarily have to be right, because some of them probably aren't right. Some of the answers aren't probably right. But how, do they have the conviction? Because I know there's ambiguity there, but do they have the conviction? Can they convey that? Do they make me feel it? I'm only a halfway good investor. I make investments. I do angel investments, and I've done okay. My hit rate isn't, it's less than 1 out of 2. But the ones who have made it have done really, really well for me. And I think I'm not a great investor because I go too much by my feelings. Do I feel this, that, and I don't do enough research. A lot of it I don't have time to do enough research. But what I look for is, are they formidable? Do they have the ability to persevere? Are they tenacious? Are they smart? Can they talk? Can they sell? Can they lead? Have they already developed a prototype that's really interesting? Have they gotten a customer that's willing to pay for it, or even just willing to use it? Have they acquired a team of people? So there's no one, necessarily that makes up, are they formidable? There's lots of things that go into that. So I am looking for, how much like me are they? I'm the one I know the best, so, how much like me? Do they have some of the qualities that I have? And there is no perfect entrepreneur, by the way. We all have flaws. We all have faults. I could tell you about several of mine. I've made lots of mistakes along the way. The issue is, how do you respond to those mistakes? How quick do you recognize you made a mistake? Do you own up? Do you take responsibility for the mistakes? But that's what I'm looking for in somebody. Their personal qualities, which are almost more important than necessarily the idea that they have. The idea is maybe 20% of the equation. The other 80 is, what are you going to do with that idea? You know, do you have the ability to execute, to actually do it? That's what I'm looking for. Does that help? Okay.
Pat, thank you